Welcome to the Vantorex Genetics Research Facility. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to start up the Stabilized Genesis Reactor and how its systems work. Let's go and begin. In order to start up the reactor in this facility, you need to open the turbine valves, turn on the servers, turn on the power units, prepare the coolant pumps, and prime the energy pistons. First, we need to turn on the turbine valves. This process can be done in the turbine hall, where the turbine control room is located right here. The turbines are located at sector C2, which is underground. You either gotta take the elevator or the stairs. Once you arrive at the turbines, you need to go through this door right here. This will access you to the turbine control room. Here you will find the control panel to the turbines. You need to turn on these valves. This is necessary to start up the reactor, as the turbines will automatically turn on when the reactor is active and will automatically turn off when the reactor is turned off. Once the turbine valves have been opened, head to Sector D. Head over to the Sector D elevators and take the elevator down to the sublevels. Once you arrive at the main reactor sector, you want to take a left to the elevators and head to sublevel 4. Upon arriving, you want to take a right to the server room if the door is currently closed. You can open this door with your key card. Head into the server control room where you will find this control panel. Turn on all these switches, which is the equipment switch, monitoring, reactor control, and then turn on the server rows. Once those switches are turned on, this button will open. Press this button to start up the servers, which is necessary to start up the reactor, as you need to turn on the monitoring system to the reactor control room. Upon pressing this button, the servers will slowly start up. Once the servers have been turned on, head over to sublevel 2, which is the reactor control area. Upon entering, the lights will be turned off, so you gotta make sure you turn on the lights first, so that way you can actually see. Go ahead and turn on these switches, which is the switches to the coolant pumps, which is the coolant pump motor and the coolant pump valves. This screen is where you can see your preparations for startup. If all of these are not true, that means the startup will not proceed, and you'll have to go back and fix that step. Next up, we gotta prime the pistons. This can be found on this left control panel, which is the energy system. You will find it right here. Turn these levers on. Once these levers are turned on, this button will open shortly. Press the button. It will take some time for the energy pistons to prime, but once that is primed, then this will be turned to true. The same will happen with these two screens. The left is the maintenance mode screen, and the right is the shutdown preparation screen. Lastly, turn on your power units for the lasers. Once everything is true, you will be able to start up the reactor. If everything else is shown correctly, the startup procedure will begin. After the reactor is successfully started up, all the systems will be online. These are your main three screens. You have the energy system, main reactor operation, and your thermal and heating systems. You have access to your temperature, stability, operation time, and the reactor status. On the right side, you have the smaller controls on this side from the thermal systems and heating systems. For thermal systems, you have cooling pumps, which are all offline, but this can be changed by pressing this button right here. This button will turn on the coolant pumps, and you'll have access to coolant flow. Coolant flow is what cools down the reactor and preventing it from overheating. Next up, you have ventilation. There are 4 vents in the reactor core chamber. There's 2 vents on the left side and 2 on the right side. The ventilation is what cools down the reactor chamber, which cools down the external reactor structure, preventing it from overheating. Upon the reactor external structure cooling down, it also cools down the inner structure, which will potentially cool down the reactor, preventing it from overheating. In the event that the reactor reaches above 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, this button will be available. Upon pressing this button, these vents will shut off if they're turned on or off, and will fill the chamber with lots of cooling air. For heating systems, you have your two lasers, laser alpha and laser beta. This can be operated here. You have your laser power right here. Laser power is what controls the reactor's heating. Increasing the laser power will start heating the reactor, and decreasing it will still heat up the reactor, but very slowly. This applies to both lasers. Next, you have your power level. The reactor's power can be operated at sublevel 5B. Upon increasing the reactor power level, it also increases the reactor energy at a faster rate. Be careful for your reactor energy. Do not let it get above 100%. The reactor builds up energy as the reactor continues to be operated. If the reactor energy gets too high, you can initiate with the power purge button. When this monitoring shows all green, this button will open and you will be able to purge the reactor, releasing the energy. If the reactor energy is too high, the reactor will overload and cause structural damage to the energy core. If the structural integrity is too low, the reactor will overload and cause a nuclear meltdown. We're done here.